right now. All right, look, we are doing 8.6. Okay, 8.6. Do you guys remember what I did yesterday with the whole family tree? The two things you're going to add to your family tree, and you can totally, if you want to show me this before you take your quiz on Monday, you can show me your family tree, and you can use it. One of the things that is not up here, what did I forget? I've got quadrilaterals, parallelograms, trapezoids. Parallelograms have two children, rectangle and rhombus. And rectangle and rhombus, you have a child, square. And the trapezoid has one child, isosceles trapezoid. What shape am I forgetting from yesterday? Kite. Where does kite go? Is it a parallelogram? Is it a trapezoid? Is it just a new one? It's a new one. So I heard some people say that they thought a kite was a trapezoid. What does a kite have or not have that a trapezoid does? No, a kite was two pairs of sides were congruent. But they were not opposite each other. They were, what do we call that? When something's not opposite, Zayla, but right next to each other? Consecutive. Okay, put that away, please. A trapezoid has one pair of parallel sides. Does a kite have any parallel sides? If we were to draw a kite, let's look at it. Are there any parallel sides to that kite? No. My consecutive sides are congruent, and it has one pair of congruent angles. Okay, that's our definitions of a kite. What else does a kite have we talked about yesterday? Something about their diagonals. Their diagonals are perpendicular. Good. Okay, so let's go ahead. So remember, your family tree should look way more detailed than this. You should have all the things that a kite has, all the things that a trapezoid has, an isosceles trapezoid, square, rectangle, rhombus, parallelogram, quadrilateral. What's one more thing you might want to have up here? So you do want to have that for a quadrilateral. Is there anything above a quadrilateral? Anybody remember? What would that be called if it was above a quadrilateral? Polygon. And the reason you want polygon is because you want interior angles of a polygon, sum of interior angles, one interior angle, and exterior angles. Okay? If you have all of that for your family tree, if you have all these things listed, you don't really need your vocab. It might be a better way of organizing your vocab. But if you would like both, you can. If you just want your vocab, you can. Again, this is things you can use on your quiz and on your tests. Okay, we are going to go down to example 1. Okay. We are going to determine from the information given if this is a trapezoid, parallelogram, rectangle, rhombus, or square. All right. Who's got an idea of which one it is? Okay. Dana says she thinks it's, and what? Yeah. She thinks it's a parallelogram and a rhombus. That's okay. It's a guess. All right. Can somebody please state what we are given in this picture? What's given here to help us out? There's only one thing. Yes? We've got 4 sides. Okay, so there's 2 things. There's one more. What is congruent, Emily? It bisects. Good. It bisects. So if the diagonals are bisectors, what does that mean it is? So let's look. Let's look at our family tree from yesterday. Let's think. What had that diagonals bisected each other? Did a polygon? No. What about a quadrilateral? A quadrilateral? No. So what had that diagonals bisect each other? Let's see. I'm looking over here. Oh, theorem 810. If the diagonals of a quadrilateral, so it's 4 sides, so we know it's a quadrilateral, bisect each other, then the quadrilateral is a parallelogram. So we know it is a parallelogram. Okay, and Dana wants it to also be a rhombus. What is something that we would have to have up here? There are a couple things to prove that it would be a rhombus. Do we know that all four sides are equal? No. Do we know that the diagonals bisect the angles? No. Do we know that the diagonals are perpendicular? No. Therefore, we don't know if it's a rhombus. So the most we can prove is a parallelogram. It was a good guess, though. All right, let's move on to example 2. So, let's move on to example 2. Are you given enough information in this diagram to conclude it is a square? Explain your reasoning. Okay, hands up if you think, yes, you can prove it's a square. Okay, hands down. Hands up if you say it can't be proven. Okay, how do you prove that it's a square? Yes, Dana. We know the only thing we were given in this picture is it has four congruent sides. All right, so that's when we want to go back to that family tree. Let's look. All right. So quadrilateral just says it's 4 sides. It doesn't say they're congruent. So I know it's got to be more specific than that. Parallelogram says opposite sides are congruent. So I know I can go more specific than that. What about a rectangle? Rectangle doesn't say 4 congruent sides. What about a rhombus? What does a rhombus say? 4 congruent sides. Is there anything on that that would disprove that it was a rhombus? No. So, are you given enough information? The answer would be no. A rhombus also has 4 congruent sides. What would I need? What is the second thing I would need in order to prove that this is not a rhombus but a square? 4 right angles. It would have to have 4 congruent sides and 4 right angles to be able to prove it. It doesn't show it. And what is another thing that could prove anything about the diagonals? That everything can have diagonals. If it had diagonals, what would the diagonals have to be in order to prove that it was a square? Perpendicular, but rhombus also has perpendicular diagonals. What has 4 congruent sides? And the diagonals would have to be congruent. What else has congruent diagonals? A square and what other shape? Rectangle. So if it had 4 congruent sides, I knew it couldn't be a rectangle. But if it had diagonals that were congruent to each other, I could say it's not a rhombus. So it would have to be a square. All right, let's turn it over and look at example 3. Okay. Are we given enough information to prove that this is an isosceles trapezoid? An isosceles trapezoid. What is the definition of a trapezoid? It has, correct. We don't know that. All right. Let's see, what else do we got about them? What else do we have about trapezoids that we could use? The legs are congruent will prove it's an isosceles trapezoid, yes, and we don't have that. What do we have up here? Angles. Okay, so let's look at the trapezoids and see what it says about angles. A trapezoid has 2 pairs of base angles. All right, and the base angles, if they're all congruent to each other, does that make it an isosceles? Yes. If both pairs of base angles are congruent, it is an isosceles. Isosceles trapezoid. Okay, does anything else have angles that are congruent to each other? No, a square and a rectangle have 4 congruent angles, right? But they are all congruent. They're all 90. We know that parallelograms have opposite angles are congruent, but these are consecutive angles at the bases that are congruent. Okay. So your homework tonight is just based on, proving what they are. Is it and it's going to be harder than this too, because sometimes it's going to be like, what would the angle have to be in order to prove that it was a kite? And you're going to have to use like 360 minus stuff and all of that. So let's look at your homework real quick and make sure there's no questions. We're looking at page 554. Page 554. All right, problems 4 through 10. You've got to decide what they have. So you kind of have to copy this chart in here and say, okay, both pairs of opposite sides are congruent. You've got to check which ones those are. Both pairs of, exactly one pair of opposite sides are parallel. Got to check which ones those are and so on. 12, you got to tell me what's wrong. 14 and 16 is give me all the names it could possibly be. So, for example, if it's a rectangle, that means it's a quadrilateral, parallelogram, and a rectangle. 18 and 20, you're trying to see if there's enough information for those things. 22 and 24, you have to use distance formula and slope to be able to prove them. And you're going to have one like that in your quiz. So you should be really careful about 22 and 24. And 26 is just saying what things do you need in order to prove that that is that shape. Okay? So your homework shouldn't be too bad. The most difficult ones are going to be 22 and 24 because you're going to have to use like the distance formula and the slope formula. Okay? We get out of here at 8:35.